Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Molly. I'm a mum here in the UK of 2 children. My husband and I have a biological 4-year-old little girl, and last year we brought home our son through UK adoption. Today's video, I'm quickly going to talk about references in the UK adoption process. This was one of the most stressful parts of the process for me, and I acknowledge that a lot of people feel the same from messages that I get, and a lot of people panicking about why they need references and what they're going to get asked and how much detail they're going to go into. So I hope that this video can provide some reassurance. So I can only talk from our experience and what our voluntary agency did, but they asked us at our first stage 1 meeting to list 3 references for them to contact. They asked for 1 family member and 2 friends who didn't have to be like mutually close to us, but they needed to have known us as a couple for the last 5 years, I think it was. We had my husband's sister as our family reference, and then we had my best friend and one of my husband's good friends who both know us very well as well. So we had a good mix of referees. What we did was we just wrote down their details for our social worker, and I believe that they were pretty much immediately contacted for a written reference. Now, we didn't know anything about the referencing process. We still don't know what was put on the reference or kind of what was discussed or asked. I mean, we do kind of get, told little bits after the process has now gone about what kind of questions they asked, and it was very much things personal to us. So I believe that references can be tailored to personal circumstances. Whilst I think there are some general questions such as what do you think about their experience with children, or why do you think they would be good parents, we had quite specific questions such as, please can you describe the family dog? Please can you describe how they currently parent their daughter? Would you trust them with your children? That kind of thing. So the written reference tends to be quite generic. None of our referees had any issues filling it out. It was pretty simple, they said, and they just sent it back. And from those written references, our social worker then formulated some questions to go and interview them about in person. This was the bit where I was so stressed. I was thinking, what are they going to ask? Is she going to be nice? Is it going to be really detailed? Is it going to be like a typical reference interview? Just because I had no idea what was going to be asked, and I like to be in control, so I was quite stressing. But our social worker reassured us and said that it's just a standard thing. She's not going to try and, she doesn't want to fail us. That's not why they do references. It's purely just because they need somebody to vouch for us and get an understanding about us and our lives from outsiders, from somebody else's eyes. Our social worker then went and arranged, I think it was like an hour-long interview with each of our references. She did this for us at the end of stage 1. But again, I know with COVID and some other people generally, depending on different local authority or voluntary agencies guidelines, it can be in stage 2. I don't think it matters when it is, as long as it gets done, because it is a very standard part of the adoption process. We did have some follow-up phone calls from our friends just to reassure us that everything went okay. Now that the process has gone through, we are a little bit more wary about some of the questions that were asked, and they were very much the questions I expected. Whilst I think references are generally there to kind of, vouch for you as parents, the social worker already knows all the positives about you, and what they want to challenge are the harder parts of your lives. So if, for example, you've had mental health issues in the past like myself, I know that I think all 3 of the referees were asked about how they view my mental health now, how they think I would cope if a child triggered me, if mental health has got in the way of my current parenting in their opinion. And again, it sounds scary and it sounds like they're trying to trip you up. They wanted to gain the insight from our support network and from the people who would be there to support us if, for whatever reason, I did struggle with mental health in the future. I think the references can be quite intense. Our referees definitely did not have any clue what to expect. All 3 of them they have very professional jobs and are used to interviews and being interviewed and kind of being grilled, if you will. But I will say, I gave them a heads up that it might be quite intense, but after the hour interviews, we did get calls being like, I can't believe they asked that. I didn't expect them to ask that. And it wasn't a worry, because it wasn't like they were stumped. They were just shocked at how much detail the adoption process had to go into and how intrusive it could be. And I don't think any of them expected that. And that is a moment they started to appreciate that we were really being put through our paces in the UK adoption process. Regardless of how stressed I was that day, they went absolutely fine. Our social worker did admit that she had to grill them a little bit because she needs to get honest answers, but it didn't hinder us whatsoever. She was very happy with their answers, and so I wanted to share that to put anybody's minds at ease that are panic about references, about those personal referees. We also did get references from our employers. I believe this was quite simple, a simple form about employment, but again we were asked, I believe my employer was asked about my parenting of my child, or any concerns that they had. So anything that they wrote on there, I believe they just followed that up with my employer, the same with my husband's. And that was just to kind of have on file. They just want to know that you've got a supportive employer, that you definitely are in employment and have, I guess, the financial means to support a child. We did get references from previous employers as well. I believe both my previous employers were contacted. Where you have worked with children, you will absolutely have to have a reference from that employer, even if it's 15 years ago, I believe. So again, that's just because they want to see that you've evidenced working with children and how that was and how they thought you interacted with them. For me, that wasn't the case, but for my husband, he had quite a shed load of references. One other thing that I will mention, now this is not relevant to us because we didn't experience this, but a lot of people panic about the fact that ex-partners might be contacted for a reference. And I understand why people would panic, because I guess ex-partners are an ex for a reason, and not everything always ends amicably. The reason that I have been told that this happened or happens is because if you have lived with an ex-partner or raised a child or step-parented another person's child, they want to know how it went. They want to know how they felt about you raising that child, about how it was living with another person. And again, it all has a purpose. It's not to try and trip you up. It's just a generic part of the process. But I believe that social workers are very wary that not all relationships are ended amicably, and some ex-partners may not have the best motives. That's all taken into account. But again, I can't comment on that personally, but it is a reference just to keep in mind. An agency or a local authority will also do checks with your local authority. You'll also get a DBS check as part of the process. You'll get your financial details vetted and checked, but again, I suppose that's not really a reference. If you do have children already, you may get a reference from their school or their nursery. So because we had a biological daughter who was 3 at the time, she was in nursery. So the manager of the nursery had to do a reference for her. I don't really know what was on it again, but I believe it was just to say, how is she developing? How is our parental communication with the setting? How are we supporting her development, etc. Just again for their professional opinion on that. The last kind of reference would be your GP or doctor's medical. So as part of the UK adoption process, you will have a medical by your local doctor. It's normally done privately. Either you or your agency or LA will pay for it. And it's a really long document which just goes through all of your past health. The doctor will ask you a few questions about if you've got any concerns, about how any medical implications will impact your ability to adopt or parent, and then they will give you a reference that you don't actually see on the back of the form that is basically their professional opinion about whether or not you are medically, physically, mentally capable of going through the adoption process and becoming an approved adopter. That will then go to your agency or local authority, where they will have a medical person or medical supervisor, or they'll contract a doctor in to have a look at it for a second opinion, and they'll basically give the thumbs up or just say, can you query this point in the assessment process again? And that's just a well-rounded check to make sure that you are good to go, really. I hope that's been helpful and put some of your minds at ease. I do not want to scare anybody about this part of the process, but it was probably one of the scariest parts for me, just given some of the harder times that I have experienced and me and my husband have experienced. I was really nervous because I knew it would come up into question a lot, as it did. But it did not hinder us in the process at all. Again, your referees will be there to vouch for you, and your social worker just wants to see that you have the good support there. If you do have any questions or comments, you can just comment them down below, or you can find me on Instagram at MollyMamaAdopt. I'm happy to help in any way. Please also subscribe to my channel, either by clicking the red button below or my face in one of these corners, and I will be uploading more content hopefully weekly. Thank you for watching, guys. Bye!